Good evening, all. Today, I will just discuss the basics of Fourier series very briefly, indeed. That is, I plan to discuss up to the Riemann-Leibniz lemma with its proof, and some historical background first. Just a moment. Yeah. So all this Fourier analysis was in fact motivated by some certain problems in physics. For example, the problem of the vibrating string or any sorts of oscillations for that matter uh, is a oscillations is a periodic phenomenon. So Fourier, in order to analyze it mathematically, Fourier attempted to, he formulated the following problem. uh, I'm going to take a function on the real line, which is its domain is supposed to be the time variation, and with complex valued function, and I can normalize whatever its period is. Let's say I can normalize it to 1 by a simple change of variable. That is x replaced by x divided by the period. So the function with period 1, Fourier actually wanted to express it as a linear combination of something discrete, in the sense, uh, since we all know that this cos kx and sin kx both have period 1, right? Because if I replace k by k plus 1 or x by x plus 1 rather, I get the cos of that original term plus 2 pi k, and cosine and sine have period 2 pi, so I again get back the same function. So Fourier thought that any arbitrary periodic function should be expressible as a linear combination of these sines and cosines, possibly an infinite linear combination. Because not all functions are simply trigonometric polynomials, possibly an infinite combination. The first observation towards addressing this problem I want to make is that this I can just as I normalize the period to 1, I can also consider f as on any interval of unit length. Let's say closed interval, that is 0 to 1, for example, because it's a periodic phenomenon. By simple change of another change of variable, that is, I have to shifting the interval, I can make it 0 to 1. And these terms cos kx, 2 pi kx and sin 2 pi kx, I invoke the Euler's identity here, which says that exponential of Iy is a cos y plus I times sin y. Hence, this f of x can be rewritten if I substitute for y this cos 2 pi kx, then f of x will look something like this, right? F of x is some constant times exponential of 2 pi I kx, k ranging over here the k was, since it follows from this identity that uh, exponential of iy plus exponential of minus iy is actually 2 times cos y. So if I want to replace this cos term, then I will get 2 pi I kx plus 2 pi I minus kx. That is, even the negative values of, although k was ranging through non-negative integers here, k will range through all integers here. Okay. So now these exponential of 2 pi I kx, these satisfy the following orthogonality relation. It is very easy to check. First of all, if k is equal to m, then there is nothing to prove. That is, if I integrate this exponential of unit function k equal to m, for example, 1, I just get 1, right? Dx is missing here. any case, but if I have k not equal to m, then these functions are orthogonal in the sense, the if I multiply 2 pi kx with minus 2 pi mx for k not equal to m, I get 0 on integration. Why is it called orthogonality relation? As we shall see later, it is actually you can define inner product for functions, and with respect to which uh, these functions are orthogonal. So orthogonality literally in and some advanced sense, it really means it is they are orthogonal. That is the vectors representing these two functions in an infinite dimensional Hilbert space will be orthogonal. So much for this. So I'll go back to the series for once. F of x is ak cos, or rather the second one, f of x is ck into e raised to 2 pi I kx. So the first, the whole idea is this. I want this coefficient ck somehow. Okay. So I integrate by uh, exponential of 2 pi I minus or cm, let's say, because k is a dummy index here. So I multiply by the, somehow want to use the orthogonality relations to obtain the individual coefficients. So what I do is that previous series, there are modulo some convergence assumptions which I will clarify in a while. If I multiply this by exponential of minus 2 pi I mx and integrated term, why uniform convergence of series? Because I want to integrate it term by term. Okay, so this will give you cm is equal to all the terms except for k not equal to m will get cancelled, and I will get this dx again. So motivated by this, Fourier now this integrability condition, Fourier coefficients are defined. That is, if f is an integrable function with period 1, actually any interval except this 0 to 1 will work equally well, because the value of this integral, this is a periodic function. Whatever I have, f of x into exponential of whatever, the integrand itself is a periodic function. So which interval? So for example, half to 3 by 2, or any such interval of closed interval of unit length could be chosen. And so Fourier coefficients are defined in this way. Why do I for this to make sense? That is, I don't know whether this integral converges or not. So I try to apply Lebesgue dominated convergence theorem. That is, take its absolute value and see if it see whether basically see whether this function is dominated by some other function. So this is dominated by mod fx. That's why they because exponential of this exponential term has absolute value 1 in complex numbers. So the absolute value doesn't change. Absolute value of f of x doesn't change, and hence what I have is if it is integrable, that is mod fx dx over 0 to 1 is finite, then these coefficients are well defined. Next, Fourier actually claimed that an arbitrary function from 0 1 to in the domain 0 to 1, or else you can regard it as a periodic function restricted to 0 comma 1 basically. So it Fourier claimed that any function satisfies for ck in this previous series, you can put these Fourier coefficients f hat of k. So how true is this? That is the question. So it later there are counter examples have been posed. That is, Kolmogorov, for example, found an integrable function whose Fourier series diverges everywhere. So integrability is going to be too weak a condition for this expression to hold. So next comes to integrability. Let's relax this a little and assume that the function is continuous. Is this still true? But yes, in some sense, Carlson proved that a continuous function on a closed interval, more specifically, in or more generally, rather, any square integrable function on 0 to 1, the Fourier series converges almost everywhere. That is, wherever it doesn't converge, it is a set of measure 0. You are familiar with this term. So, and Dubois-Reymond's, he proved that there is a continuous function with whose Fourier series diverges at any, at a certain point in 0 to 1. What this means is, as Carlson later proved, the Carlson's content of Carlson's theorem is that the set of exceptions has measure 0, just as that one point was an exception in Dubois-Reymond's example. So even continuity is not guaranteed to be enough. It is almost enough. So almost enough in the sense the Fourier series will cover almost everywhere. However, now some questions come. Some questions are in due. That is, suppose I am given an integrable function. Then as observed before, we can use the dominated convergence theorem to conclude that its Fourier coefficients are finite. Then we can ask the following: when does the Fourier series converge, first of all? Second question, given if it converges, does it converge to f of x? Otherwise, this Fourier expansion would be of very little use indeed. And third, whenever the Fourier series converges, is it absolutely convergent? That is, what order are the Fourier terms of the Fourier series to be added? If you change the order a little, as we or do some bracketing for the series, grouping for the series, then can the answer possibly change? And finally, okay, somehow imagine that you had all the affirmative answer to all the first three questions. Now comes the major question: is the function uniquely determined by Fourier series? Otherwise, also the Fourier series will have little use. As it turns out, when does the Fourier series converge? Fourier series may not converge at all, as Kolmogov's example shows. Integrability is too weak a condition. And even if it converges, what does its value agree with f of x? The answer is it may not. Actually, it may not. Unless that is piecewise C1, that is piecewise continuously differentiable, and even then use some additional hypothesis to guarantee that its value agrees with f of x. Then, if it converges, is it absolute? That also will be addressed later. And is the function uniquely determined by its Fourier series? Provided that the function is square integrable, it is. So let's proceed to prove address these questions one by one. So first of all, any questions up to now? For any questions apart from these four, that is? Okay then. So the major concept for Fourier series of one variable.
I will ask a question to them. I mean, he
Yes.
talked about, is it clear that there will be some sort of convergence? I mean, he's taking a coefficient. So can you see that there is some convergence happening in this?
Yes, back in this series.
Yeah.
I
mean, you already
Yes.
know some Hilbert space theory. So using that, I'm asking these people, not you. I mean, asking this.
Okay.
Using Hilbert space theory, can you say that some convergence happening? Anyone can answer this? I mean, can so no one is responding. Ah,
Yes. Anyone?
I lost connection. Can you repeat the question?
no, the question is he has defined those coefficients. See, he's asked some questions about convergence, but can you see? I mean, immediately, can you see that there should be some sort of convergence? He said there is an almost everywhere convergence. Is that clear? Or some other convergence? For example, L2 convergence. Is that clear? From the Hilbert space theory we have done. And can you see what are those CM?
It is the so it is that like inner product of f with e to the power 2 pi I.
Correct. So that forms an orthonormal basis, and that is just the inner product with the orthonormal basis. And we know that sum converges. Summation, any vector inner product with the orthonormal basis. I mean, then you sum with the orthonormal basis, which are called the Fourier coefficient, and that converges. It is precisely that. So the question is whether we have other conversion. That's what the question is, right? Okay, that's what I want to. I mean, just this is something very familiar. That's what I want to say. Okay, you can continue.
Okay. So the idea is to construct a sort of approximate identity. That is approximate identity. I will explain in a while what this means. It is hopeless to by the examples of Kolmogorov and Raymonds, etc. we just saw. It would be ambitious to hope that the Fourier series can converge absolutely or uniformly anywhere, because there is an infinity of terms involved. So what we do is we mimic what we do for finite, ordinary convergent series. That is to take partial sums and take their estimate them and see if a limit exists. So the nth partial sum, now here I am taking symmetric partial sums because both the functions sine kx and cos sine 2 pi kx and cos 2 pi kx both are involved at the same time. That's why I am taking symmetric sum. So this turns out to be defined a very. So now, because there are finitely many terms involved, you can do interchange, integration, and summation, and because only finitely many terms are involved, and so you can define one more definition is in order. The Dirichlet kernel is defined to be, it's simply a sort of geometric series. That is sum of two geometric series, to be precise. It is you add exponential of 2 pi I kt for between minus n to n. That is all k integers of magnitude less than or equal to capital N. Okay. So in this notation, a short calculation would reveal the following. This Sn of f, it will turn out to be this. Later you will see that this is called the convolution of f with dn. Okay. Convolution means f of x minus t g of t dt over the interval. It is if on the side of the Fourier transform, as you will see later, this convolution is like taking products. It can be made rigorous also. So this is, you can as of now you can think of this as an analog for product or convolution. And these Dirichlet kernels for any capital N, they satisfy the following properties, that they integrate to 1 first of all over 0 to 1, and their absolute value it the cannot exceed the reciprocal of sine pi delta, or that is whatever the infimum of all such t involved is. So what this means is I could not place any pictures etc. of this DNT or to picture the convergence actually, but this DN is an for this convolution product, the DN will be sort of an approximate identity for this. That is, under certain conditions, this DNT will because they have absolute value 1, as well as these functions, they look more and more like uh, Dirac delta function, so as to say. Then these are the reasons why Dirichlet or chose these functions. So I will just state one criterion. There are several others. That does everyone know what a function of bounded variation is? Let's say I have an interval 0 to 1. What a bounded variation of a function basically? What it is? Otherwise, I can explain.
Maybe you can define it.
Okay. So variation of a function is defined as follows. I could you take a partition n points inside this interval 0 to 1, x1, x2, xn, let's say, and take modulus of f of xi minus f of xi plus 1 and add over all such I. Then if that quantity sum of all such differences of these functions on the interval xi, not on the interval from xi to xi plus 1, this is called the variation, provided you take the supremum over all such choices of n points, and supremum as n goes to infinity, of course. So it is sort of this sounds like a complicated description, but a more intuitive description is that if f happens to be differentiable, then it is simply mod f dash of x dx integrated from 0 to 1. That is its absolute value of its derivative integrated from 0 to 1. So you can think of this as something like an measure of arc length. Anyway, equivalently here the definition which will we will be using is equivalently it is the difference of two monotonically increasing functions, or rather monotonically non-decreasing functions. Suppose x has a bounded variation in the neighborhood of 0 to 1 at a point, then these partial sums, symmetric partial sums, converge to f. See, I have this bounded variation does not mean continuity. So I have to take one-sided limits. So f of right-handed limit plus left-handed limit divided by 2. These sums converge to the average of the two limits. So if f is continuous, of course, there is nothing to prove. That is because the right-handed and left-handed limits match. In fact, continuity exactly means that right-handed and left-handed limits are matching, and the average of the two limits is what this sequence of partial sums, symmetric partial sums, converges to. I will skip the proof for a while because it requires Riemann-Lebesgue lemma. So let me explain this Riemann-Lebesgue lemma. You have are you already familiar with this Hilbert spaces or anything of the sort?
Yeah, they should be able to guess this is true. Yeah.
Okay. So see, I'll take a brief recap before proceeding to the the Riemann-Lebesgue lemma. I'm claiming that an arbitrary series can be. I want to represent an arbitrary so-called at least an integrable function by a Fourier series. So what I need to figure out is when the series converges, that is, and if it converges, whether it is f of x. So if I assume that f of x is square integrable, then you know that the completion of the space of square integrable functions is a Hilbert space, right? So I take all integrable complex valued, for instance, functions which are square integrable, and where functions which are equal almost everywhere are to be identified. That also is the convention. As usual, in when while talking about integration, we assume that. So given such a function, square integrable function, uh, when does its Fourier series converge? So that with this, uh, I have to define a norm on that, right? What Fourier series says is, I had function that is on the entire interval 0 to 1. For the entire interval 0 to 1, I had a number assigned to every point. That is a function. Too much of data. So looking another way in terms of the Fourier coefficients, that is, I can change this continuous data to something discrete, that is only countably many terms. That is the whole essence of Fourier series. And as you will see later that, so Fourier series is sort of just another point of view, that is Fourier, a function to its Fourier series. It is an isometry of Hilbert spaces. Actually, the Fourier transform will also turn out to be the same. Uh, that is, if you take this sequence, it will, and f is square integrable, then absolute value of, if I take absolute value of f hat k square, that is this sequence of the Fourier coefficients will also turn out to be square integrable, and the values will agree with its L2 norm. So this is the after we will see that. So because you are already familiar with Hilbert spaces, you should also be able to figure out that this is nothing but the inner product of f of x with a basis element. That is, inner product is defined as f of x g bar of x dx. That is the inner product of f and g. So this is f of x, and e raised to 2 pi I mx is a basis element. Its conjugate will force a minus sign here and integrate. It is nothing but simple. Actually, Fourier series is nothing but the expansion, basis expansion of a square integrable function. So if, of course, it works pretty well if the function is square integrable, but otherwise, if there are problems, as the examples we saw, that is the previous examples show. If I just assume, for example, that the function is integrable, the series may not make sense. Coming back to this Riemann-Lebesgue lemma, it roughly states that I have an integrable function with period 1, then the Fourier coefficients, they tend to 0 as I increase the magnitude of k. Okay. So what this is actually saying is, if since you are already familiar with Hilbert spaces, this sequence of coefficients f hat of k, it converges weakly to 0. In case you are already familiar with this term, weak convergence, notion of weak convergence.
Weak convergence is not defined, but they know that that coefficient is L2 summable when f is L2. So,
L2 is summable. Okay.
Yeah, that they know. So when it is L2, it is L2 summable. So they know that this should go to 0. But I mean, it's not weak convergence. They don't know.
So whenever it is square integrable, then this the L2 norm of that function will turn out to be the L2, the small L2 norm of this sequence of Fourier coefficients, right? And so, but the point is, what will happen if it is only integrable? So, and not necessarily square integrable. So, a priori, there is no reason for such a inequality such as Bessel's theorem, that is Bessel's equality, etc. There is no reason a priori to for such equalities to hold, but it really says that given the Riemann-Lemaitre lemma really says that given any integrable function, the nth Fourier coefficients tends to 0. It does not see only because it is the kth term or nth term is tending to 0 does not guarantee its convergence or in any reasonable way, but this Fourier transform, sorry, the Fourier coefficients, they converge to 0. At least that much you can guarantee. So let's, I will explain how to prove this. A short calculation. What one does is, in the definition of f hat of k, we do a short trick, that is a change of variable. I replace x by x plus 1, and after you can verify this, that is f hat of k, by a short trick, it will turn out to be equal to this quantity also. Simple to verify, but note that the whole idea is based on this equation, that is x minus 1 by 2k, and what we have to prove that is that k, as k grows larger and larger, observe that it is 1 by 2k is going to 0. So f of x minus 1 by 2k. So this is a very small quantity. I'm just giving some motivation for how on earth this whole expression is going to be helpful. So f of x minus x minus 2k. If f is continuous as k goes to 0, the first square bracket term is going to 0, and this we already know how to deal with this, right? So it will reduce to something like a constant times exponential of minus 2 pi I kx dx, and we already know that this for k not equal to m, that is if I take k equal to or rather minus k and m equal to 0 in the whatever the orthogonality relation we have. The whole point is given precisely, if I have a positive number epsilon, then I can approximate this by a continuous function g, such that their absolute value of their difference integrated from 0 to 1 is at the most epsilon by 2. Does it remind you of any theorem, especially the one you have learned in this course? Anyone? Or any theorem which might be able to justify that any integrable function can be approximated as closely as possible by a
Stone-Weierstrass theorem.
yes.
Stone-Weierstrass theorem.
Stone-Weierstrass theorem, yeah, it says that given us it gives a certain specific condition under which a sequence of functions continue or rather Stone-Weierstrass is Weierstrass theorem, as we shall see. It is about this approximating continuous functions by polynomials. But here this f is not f can be far from being a polynomial. So what I want is something more fundamental. That is, I am given an integrable, only integrable function, and I have to approximate it by a continuous function. So any theorem, especially the previous talk, if I must give another hint. How about Leucin's theorem, which we discussed in the previous talk? Leucin's theorem says that at least if not over the whole interval 0 to 1, but if not on the whole interval 0 to 1, there is an at least interval of length 1 minus delta, that is slightly smaller interval. This is possible, and the convergence is uniform also. That is what the content of the Leucin's theorem is. I'm not going to explain it here because, but basically the idea is this: use what this equation really says is that in the continuous functions on an interval of finite measure are dense in the L1 norm of in the space of integrable functions. That's what the content of this theorem. Anyway, once this is justified that I can choose a function, I can approximate f by a continuous function. The idea is to apply this equation, that is f of x minus 1 by 2k. 1 by 2k, as it goes to the k grows larger, this grows to, or rather diminishes to 0, and so I get something familiar. Lastly, I have only addressed, I want to make this mod f hat of k less than epsilon. I have only the first step, that is approximating it by continuous function, would only address that up to epsilon by 2, right? Lastly, this k, or rather the absolute value of k, is to be chosen so large that there is a small typo here. It should be absolute value of g hat of k, the whole thing, not absolute value of g hat of bracket k. That is, the Fourier coefficients of g, they should not be. So assume that we have proved it, or rather, for continuous functions, we have established the first equation. Once we have established the first equation, then it is easy to see for continuous functions that f hat of k tends to 0. Since g is continuous, and it is g hat of k will also be less than epsilon by 2 in absolute value. And lastly, if k is chosen large enough, then this will also be less than epsilon by 2. And so these two epsilon by 2 will add up to epsilon. Think about it. I mean, first of all, are there any questions? I know this is a slightly sketchy, but this is at least, but the whole idea is based on this formula, that is formula for Fourier coefficients. And the observation that once we prove this for continuous functions, then everything follows easily. Yes, any questions? Or any about any of the topics discussed so far? Okay, then I will briefly explain how that would help in how proving this Riemann-Lebesgue lemma would help proving this Jordan's criterion. Here, f is of bounded variation, so it is a result of elementary analysis that monotonic functions are differentiable almost everywhere. That is, apart from outside a set of measure 0, they are differentiable also. So I will just sketch the proof of Jordan's criterion in a for differentiable functions or piecewise continuous as well as differentiable functions. What one does is one is just given the symmetric partial nth partial sums, and one has to prove that these series or the sequence of symmetric partial sums converges to average of the right hand and left hand limits. The whole idea is this function mod dn of t is an approximate identity for convolution, in the sense what this means is it integrates to 1 first of all, and this mod dnt, if you plot these functions for sufficiently small values, or even if you can visualize the plot, sine of pi, it will look like something like a Dirac function. Forget about this. For deltas, think that delta is small and sine pi delta is around delta, so it will grow. It is the whole sequence as t tends to 0. This sequence will look like a Dirac delta function. If you are already, that is, it will, roughly speaking, it is 1 at or infinite at 0 and 0 elsewhere, and still has integral 1. No such function as such exists, but Dirac delta function means this is it is actually a functional, to be precise. Anyway, this integral is 1, and if I substitute f of x minus t dn of t is, unless near t equal to 0, this is shooting to infinity. However, the integral is remaining 1 in a small neighborhood of 0. So it will it has to give you f of x minus t, and f is periodic here, so x minus some point, and f of x plus h and x minus h, and it will so turn out that because I am taking symmetric partial terms, I have to average out the two, f of x plus, that is right hand side limit, plus f of x minus left hand side limit. And once I average the two things out, I will get the Jordan's criterion, and this there will be some. I have designed a little bit a couple of exercises for using this Jordan's and criterion and Riemann level lemma. By the way, what guarantees that this series, there are convergence issues, that is given the how to prove the Jordan's criterion, I mentioned that this Riemann level lemma has to be used, and this will be used precisely in order to make the precisely for convergence issues, that is the Fourier coefficients tend to 0 even in magnitude, that is the Fourier coefficients tend to 0 in magnitude. That's why this limit will turn out to exist. If f is continuous, as I mentioned, if f is continuous, it will converge to f of x. And if it is discontinuous, I'm assuming that f is almost this piecewise continuous. I can approximate it by such a function, and f of x plus f average of the right hand and left hand side limits. This being said, there are a couple of exercises this time. Somebody just mentioned, one student mentioned this Stone-Weierstrass theorem. I will only try to prove the Weierstrass approximation theorem, which means that given a compact interval or a connected compact interval, let's say 0 to 1, every continuous function can be approximated by in the supremum norm, that is maximum of their absolute value of their difference. That is called the supremum norm. And Weierstrass approximation theorem says that it can be approximated and that is any continuous function can be approximated to any extent using polynomials. Here a very important remark is due. Why do we study Fourier series at all? First of all, the first advantage is that we are choosing some continuous data to some countability, countable and discrete data. That's the one, that is the only the Fourier coefficients rather than looking at f at every point. That is one advantage of this. The second advantage is that Fourier series converges back to the function under very mild assumptions. That is integrability or square integrability is a far weaker assumptions than continuity or differentiability, and still it converges almost everywhere. The point is that if you take a continuous or rather smooth function, that is smooth meaning differentiable infinitely often, even if you take a infinitely differentiable function on 0 to 1, will its Taylor series, for instance, can it converge back to this original function pointwise? Anyone? That is, I will repeat the question. Given a infinitely differentiable function, so that the Taylor series makes sense, will the Taylor series always converge to the same function, converge back to the function? Actually, there are smooth functions, step functions. If you have seen in any other course, step function means on a short interval it is constant, and outside that interval it vanishes quickly. So if it is constant, then its derivative is 0. So this is clearly is impossible, and the answer to this question is no. That is, the Taylor series may not converge back to the function, but Fourier series very converges back to the function under very mild conditions, very milder. I mean milder than differentiability or even continuity. So the idea of the hint for the first problem is as follows. Fourier sine and cosine are can be just only show that sine and cosine can be approximated by polynomials. How do we do that? Truncated their Taylor series at some point. What you get in hand is a polynomial, for that is the partial sums of sine and cosine are polynomials. So and Fourier series, then in order to prove this, Fourier series approximates continuous functions almost everywhere, at least as we saw. Under some additional conditions, it will approximate everywhere also. So Weierstrass approximation theorem can be proved using an epsilon by 2 and epsilon by 2. Again, the same sort of argument. Approximate the continuous function by a Fourier series, and approximate the Fourier series itself by a sequence of polynomials. Taylor series, that is Taylor series of sin kx and cos kx. So after this, a short exercise on Jordan's criterion. Here, a very weak version of Jordan's criterion will be used. That is, if the function is piecewise smooth, then Jordan's criterion. Not bounded variation is a very strong condition, or a rather weak condition. Here I am assuming in particular that this mod x function is continuous but not differentiable, and of bounded variation also. Hence, I ask you to prove this short. This is a short exercise using Jordan's criterion as well as the Riemann-Lebesgue lemma. That if I take cos 2 pi odd integers, first of all, since I am taking cosines of odd integers, I have to get an odd function, right? Or sorry, even function, because cosines are even functions. I replace x by minus x and I get back the same thing. So this is the resulting function must also have to be even. Had it been this only sines instead of cosines, then the resulting function would have been odd. If I take only cosines of odd multiples of x and divide by the respective multiple square and sum the series, you will have to prove two things. First of all, this series converges. And what does it converge to? For every x, it converges to pi by 2 minus mod x. This is a straightforward example. Convergence will involve this Riemann-Lebesgue lemma also. Or in turn, you can directly use Jordan's criterion. And then using this or otherwise, we get the famous Euler's identity. It is not entirely trivial to reduce 3 from 2, because here we have all integers and here only odd integers are squares of odd integers are popping up. So Euler's famous result that sum of the squares, reciprocals of the squares of integers is pi square by 6. Apparently at that time this was a really new stunning result. Lastly, before I end, I will also talk out some connections of this Fourier series. I'll go back to the original slide. How is this Fourier analysis why studied? That is Fourier analysis are related to various other areas of mathematics. The first is a major area I would like to mention is this. Observe that this sin kx and cos kx are solutions to some second order ordinary differential equation, right? That is so in general, if I take the even if you don't understand these remarks, just it's okay, because certain eigenvalues of Laplace operator are k square. That is so this sin kx and cosine kx, or with a multiple of 2 pi perhaps, they form a basis. So that of the square integrable functions. So whatever we mentioned for this L2 convergence, it is true in more generality. That is, you don't need exactly this sine and cosine. There are certain other class of function, more general class of functions, which works as well. Next remark is that this is Fourier series is also intimately linked with representation theory, because as you observe, sine or rather e raised to 2 pi I kx, the very series I used to define the Fourier coefficients, these are characters of a certain group, namely the additive group of real numbers modulo 2 pi, or rather modulo 1 here, because I already have 2 pi. The units, it is just the unit circle, complex numbers with magnitude 1, they form a group. So on that group, we are doing this sort of representations, and coefficients of the representations are it's very that for different representations, that is k not equal to m and they are orthogonal. This is you can look up the Peter-Weyl theorem if you are interested. And lastly, combining the previous two observations, I will not speak anything about physics, but because I'm not an expert in at all in that area. But combining the two, that Laplace operator or differential equation stuff with this representation theoretical terms, let me lastly mention before I stop that the Fourier series are the simplest examples of automorphic forms also, and their whole modern number theory relies on this. So this I would be very happy if somebody could show your attempts, or if you can attempt these 3 problems. The second is mostly computational. There is some use involved, but otherwise it is computational. And finally, this Weierstrass approximation theorem, this is a really interesting application of Fourier series. So any questions on any of the topics we have discussed so far? I'll go back to the first slide. Any questions or comments?
Sir, can you show that questions again?
The last page.
Yeah.
Okay. Where the question? And besides, I will be mailing the whole slides to Professor Srinivasan, and in turn, he can forward all these slides to you.
Okay.
That's not really a problem. You will get all these questions.
Okay.
Any further questions?
Can you scroll it a bit, like last question? That,
Yes.
oh. Yeah. Okay, thanks.
The last question was, I mean, in analysis 3, is the I don't know whether anybody from who took my analysis 3 course is there, but this was a question in the exam.
Yes. Oh, and this was an exam question.
Yeah, in analysis 3, BSc.
I see.
Now, I don't know whether any.
Yeah, I think I have seen this before.
Yeah.
But I was not in a Q course though.
Okay. Okay.
Okay then.
Okay, we'll end the session. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Mhm.